Ever since its debut in 1989, Berserk has dominated the dark fantasy genre like none before or after. The brainchild of the late legendary mangaka Kentaro Miura, Berserk is set in a medieval world filled with horrors and occult influences. While the manga for the series is still ongoing under the care of Miura's good friend Kouji Mori, a number of anime adaptations have been seen over the years that cover various story arcs from the manga. The first of these anime adaptations would come out in October 1997, running for a total of 25 episodes until March 1998. This anime covered the Golden Age arc of the manga that deals with Guts' introduction to Griffith and the Band of the Hawk, along with the events leading up to their betrayal and Griffith's ascension as Femto, a member of the God Hand. A trilogy of films would follow, released between 2012 and 2013, covering the events of the Golden Age arc once more. A second anime adaptation of the series, comprised of 2 seasons with 12 episodes each, would come out and run between 2016 and 2017. The first season would cover the manga's Conviction arc, while the second season would cover the first half of Falcon of the Millennium arc. After a long drought in Berserk's anime content, Studio Eclipse recently announced that they're working on Berserk's Black Swordsman arc, due sometime in the summer of 2025. The atmosphere in which the world of Berserk is set reeks of hopelessness and desolation, and everything is governed by an esoteric concept called the law of causality. To be born in this god-forsaken land riddled with war and strife, where death and mutilation await at every corner and human beings lack the faculties to take charge of their own destiny, is nothing short of a curse. While Berserk is the tale of one man's struggle against this very world on a quest for revenge and redemption, the story of our video today is a very different one. The world building by Kentaro Miura for Berserk is second to none, and this extends to the various supernatural rituals and events that take place over the course of the story. If one delves into the occult, it's quite plain to see that the rituals are an important part of its functioning. In a reflection of our own reality, the people of Berserk, by their very nature, are willing to go to any lengths to escape misery or even gain a single iota of more power. Through the law of causality and the aforementioned human nature, there have been several cataclysmic events due to rituals and wars, all of which have resulted in great upheavals in both the astral and physical planes. As they've all been preordained by a single inexplicable power, the events we're going to be talking about in today's videos are all interconnected in the web of causality. It truly speaks to the genius of Kentaro Miura to have created such an intricately woven world. While we have done several videos discussing the characters that inhabit this godforsaken world, today we'll be talking about these cataclysmic events that have shaped the fortunes of said characters and the world of Berserk as a whole. Through this video, we hope to increase your knowledge not just regarding the events we're going to be talking about today, but also the series in general. So strap up as we travel through the different astral planes and do a deep dive into the major events in Berserk that have shaped it over the course of its history. With that out of the way, let's dive right into it and pray that the law of causality doesn't choose us as its next victim. The temporal junction point. The temporal junction point is a point in time where various cause and effects come together as ordained by the idea of evil and the law of causality in order to produce some great event or calamity. Even the slightest change to the variables at these temporal junctions can alter the events massively, which is why entities like the Skull Knight attempt to interfere with causality at these points so as to change its direction from what was preordained. An example of this is during the 5th eclipse, where Casca and Guts were meant to die as sacrifices, but due to the interference of the Skull Knight, they survived the ordeal. While it might not be an event in the real world, the temporal junction points exist in all the events that take place in a human's life, including the ones that we're going to be talking about in this video. 100 Years' War. As the name would suggest, the 100 Years' War was a conflict that lasted for a century between the Kingdom of Midland and Tudor. The Tudors were a mighty kingdom with one of the most powerful armies among all the nations in Berserk's world. This expansionist empire set its sights on Midland, a monarchy that lay in the middle of the continent. If the Tudors wished to conquer the entire world, it was imperative for them to go through Midland, not only because of its location, but also because of its rich resources. To this end, the Tudor army would march unprovoked into Midland territory and capture the fortress of Doldry, marking the beginning of the 100 Years' War. For the next 100 years, The Tudors would make several inroads into the Midland territories, but would face stiff resistance from the valiant knights of the defending army. The Midland forces would attempt to retake the strategic location of Doldry back from the Tudors several times, but with no success. With this fortress needed to be taken back in order to launch a true counter-offensive, thanks to its strategic value, all of Midland's famous generals would take a crack at it, but they would break upon the fortress wall like water. The Tudors would suffer major setbacks in the Isle of Grant, where Grunbeld, a mighty warrior turned apostle, would destroy all their military bases. This would be followed by a succession war within the Tudor Empire, which would further throw the empire into disarray. This provided an ideal opportunity for the Midland army to retake Doldry finally, as the Tudors were too busy fighting amongst themselves rather than protecting their captured territories. Many mighty warriors and generals volunteered for this task, but ultimately it was the Band of the Hawk and their young commander Griffith who would be given the great honor of assaulting the fortress. The Band of the Hawk was a mercenary group led by their charismatic low-born leader Griffith, who had been fighting under the Midland banner and had been undefeated so far in the war. Griffith claimed to the king that they would be able to retake Doldry on their own without any assistance, and they would do just that. Griffith and his men would defeat the famed Tudor general Boscan and his Purple Rhino Knights and capture Doldry, marking the end of the 100 Years' War. This would lead to the Band of the Hawk being recognized as official knights of the Midland Army, granting Griffith and his company legitimacy and a means to climb the social strata. With all their dreams now within their grasp, having carved a bloody path to nobility, all seemed to be going as planned. Unfortunately for them, this moment of victory would be the beginning of their rapid decline, especially for their young commander. Having taken a mental blow after the departure of Guts, who had defeated him in a duel, Griffith begins seducing the Princess of Midland. Word of this would soon reach the king, however, who had secretly coveted his own daughter, and Griffith is captured and tortured while the Band of the Hawk is hunted. What follows is the reincarnation of Griffith as Femto, and with Guts going on his epic journey to kill his former friend and commander, the rest, as they say, is history. Sacrificial ceremony. Every now and then, an individual stumbles upon an eerie-looking egg-shaped totem with a human face etched on it. Nobody really knows how these things are created. Some say that they're created from the heads of witches, while others claim that they're created by void. According to the idea of evil, they were droplets of ideas flung through space and time into the hands of preordained individuals. No matter what their origins are, these objects, also known as behelits, forever alter the fate of those who wield them. When the possessor of the behelit undergoes immense mental duress and reaches the absolute rock bottom in their life, the behelit begins to activate. As their blood trickles on the totem and their soul is plunged into despair, the conditions are finally met for the activation of the behelit and the start of the sacrificial ceremony. The behelit's dormant facial features begin awakening as if screaming in horror as it cries tears of blood. It then teleports the user to a pocket dimension within the astral plane where they're met by the members of the God Hand. Once there, they're offered a chance to break free from the shackles of causality and live as they see fit. There's predictably a catch to this, as they have to sacrifice the soul of the person they hold the dearest in their heart. Once the person agrees to these terms, the sacrifice is marked with the brand of sacrifice and their soul is forfeit. The owner of the behelit emerges as a demon, having transcended humanity, and devours their sacrifice to seal the unholy communion. As an apostle, they live their lives unfettered by human morality, giving in to their base desires. They are sustained by human flesh and spread misery wherever they exist. An apostle is only answerable to the God Hand. However, it seems to be a voluntary thing because Ganishka completely opposes them, even though he's merely an apostle himself. Even Zod doesn't really take part in the Eclipse, which we'll discuss next, even though the apostles seem to be obligated to attend the ceremony. Regardless, the sacrifice ceremony is the cause of much tragedy, and it's the way that the God Hand executes their plans in the material world and furthers the machinations of causality. The Eclipse. Let's dive into arguably the most important canonical event in all of Berserk, the Eclipse. According to the laws of causality, magical totems called behelits are launched into eternity through time and space, making their way into the hands of preordained individuals. These egg-shaped objects are capable of summoning the God Hand, a pantheon of demonic/angelic beings, depending on whom you ask, to free them from the yoke of humanity and ascend as apostles. These behelets come in several different colors, although that in and of itself isn't of any consequence in most cases. We say most cases because if you do happen to come into the possession of a crimson behelit, well, that has a lot of consequences. This is because the appearance of a crimson behelit heralds an event called the Eclipse. Much like in the case of a regular sacrificial ceremony, which turns a person possessing a behelit into an apostle, which we discussed earlier, the eclipse is triggered by the one possessing it falling into utter despair and having their blood drip upon it. There are some key differences to what follows after that, which makes it much more grandiose in a macabre manner. Long before the individual triggers the event, as if guided by causality, the apostles from near and far gather in the locations where the eclipse is going to take place. Upon activation of the Crimson Behelit, as seen during the events of the fifth eclipse when Griffith ascended and turned into Femto, the individual is teleported along with everyone within a certain radius into an interdimensional space. The sun is eclipsed, and within this nightmarish hellscape, they're confronted by the existing members of the God Hand. There, they're asked to sacrifice the person that's closest to them, which in Griffith's case was the Band of the Hawk. It's unclear whether the number of individuals being sacrificed matters to differentiate between an apostle and a God Hand's reincarnation. The basic principle, however, remains the same. After the individual agrees to these terms, the victims are branded by the brand of sacrifice. They are then devoured mercilessly by the gathered apostles. Following this, the owner of the Crimson Behelit is transformed into not just any ordinary apostle, but one of the God Hand, the most powerful beings of the Berserk universe. We know that an eclipse took place long ago in the ancient kingdom established by King Geiserik. The story of the skull tells us how 5 angels descended upon the kingdom and destroyed it overnight. Beneath the Tower of Conviction lies the bones of the dead from Geiserik's kingdom, all of whom were branded by the brand of sacrifice, which indicates that an eclipse was the cause of the destruction of the first human empire. The eclipse that we witnessed Griffith trigger is said to be the 5th eclipse, and we are given almost no accounts of the previous 4. What we are told is that an eclipse occurs every 216 years. From a flashback we witnessed through the Berserker armor, the members of the God Hand, other than the Void, were all different from the current iteration of the group. Combining this with the fact that an eclipse happens every 216 years, giving birth to a new member of the God Hand, the question arises, are the older members replaced if the group's roster is full, or did those other members perish at some point in history? According to Skull Knight, while the God Hands are all powerful, they aren't exactly immortal, as they can be killed by something like the Sword of Actuation. Regardless, the eclipse is a major event in the Berserk universe, and it's one that heralds the birth of a literal archdemon. Incarnation Ceremony. To understand the reincarnation ceremony of Griffith, one must first understand the need for it. The world of Berserk is divided into astral planes, which are divided into various layers. These astral realms coexist at the same time as the physical realm, and there are said to be roughly 4 layers to it. The astral realm is also known as the realm of the dead by the elves and houses a number of creatures and beings that would be considered denizens of legend for an ordinary mortal. The interstice, or the in-between, forms the first layer where the boundaries between the astral and the physical realms are the murkiest. Those who dwell in the interstice exist at a crossroad where the physical realm meets the astral realms. As such, they don't truly exist only in the physical realm like most mortals do anymore. The dwellers of the interstice seem to include those marked by the brand of sacrifice like Guts and Casca, along with the witches Flora and Shirke. The realm of Kliphoff is home to creatures like the ogres and trolls, and it also lies on the cusp between the interstice and the divine realm, the strata of the astral realm, just beyond the interstice. The divine realm is the realm where the eclipse ceremony is said to take place, although this is debated and lies just above the vortex of souls. Here, according to Flora, the beings known as angels and demons or gods in polytheism reside. We believe the 4 elemental kings reside in this strata of the astral plane. Below the vortex of the soul lies the abyss. Deep within the abyss resides the idea of evil, which is represented by a massive human heart with several eyes on it. It says it was created by the collective will of the human subconscious and is responsible for the creation of the Behelits and the members of the God Hand. It's the closest to the idea of a god that we get in Berserk. According to Flora, within a remote pocket of the abyss exist the members of the God Hand, who influence the rest of the astral plane in the physical world. The denizens of these various layers can only travel between two layers above or on their own. This means that God Hands can only travel up to the divine realm, and someone like Guts, who exists in the interstice, can travel all the way down there as well if they learned how. The problem for most beings like witches or Guts is that they could technically travel to the different strata, but returning would be difficult, if not outright impossible. The Behelits basically function as a bridge between the astral planes, allowing the God Hand to bend the rules somewhat. However, they still can't manifest in their true form into the physical realm. Considering the power that these beings hold, it would be catastrophic to the balance of the world. Now that we have an understanding of the astral planes and the limitations of the God Hand in their traversal, let's talk about the actual ceremony itself. During the Conviction arc, numerous refugees gathered around the Tower of Conviction in Albion, trying to escape the wars, plague, and famine ravaging their lands. The tower is controlled by a group of psychotic missionaries belonging to the Holy See who use their influence and powers to commit atrocities in the name of their religion. Unknown to everyone, there dwelt an apostle in this location called the Egg of the Perfect World. This individual was a person that the world had forgotten and lived in a pit where the dead of Albion were thrown in. Having stumbled upon a Behelit from one of the corpses as he lay dying, getting crushed underneath the weight of the cadavers, he triggered the activation of his Behelit. Normally, when one becomes an apostle, they sacrifice the people they hold dearest to them, but what does a man who has nothing and no one sacrifice? This forsaken man would sacrifice himself and the world that had forgotten him and transform into perhaps one of the most unique apostles in Berserk. He would transform into a living Behelit that would come to be known as the Egg of the Perfect World that would be responsible for ushering in the perfect world in place of the flawed one that had abandoned him. There, he would lie in wait until the fateful day when the dead of Albion would rise once again, thanks to the presence of the God Hand's avatars and the presence of Guts and Casca. Hunted by the dead and watching their messiah Mozgus fall at the hands of Guts, the people finally give in to utter despair and trigger the Egg of the World and are sacrificed along with it, giving birth to the Falcon of Light, Griffith, into the physical realm. With this act, it sets into motion Griffith's grand plan to create the perfect world of Fantasia, which we'll discuss in a bit. This lets Griffith circumvent the natural order of things and become reborn into the physical realm, an act that no other God Hand before him had been able to achieve. This cataclysmic event changed the course of humanity irrevocably, and nothing would ever be the same again. Great Wave of the Astral World. The revelations say that when the sun dies 5 times, a red lake will appear to the west of the city with a name both new and old. It is proof that the 5th angel will alight. The angel is the Falcon of Darkness, the master of the sinful black sheep, the king of the blind white sheep, the one who shall call upon the world an age of darkness. The prophecy of the Falcon. With Griffith having broken the laws of the world by incarnating into the physical realm, he had fulfilled a part of the ancient prophecy of the Holy See called the Prophecy of the Falcon. However, incarnating into the world was only the start of his grand plan. Once incarnated, he reformed the Band of the Hawk, but this iteration of the group was composed of both humans and apostles as soldiers. He presented himself as humanity's savior, taking all the destitute and wronged under his wing and going on a crusade to end all wars. Wherever there was conflict, the Band of the Hawk would not be far behind in their crusade to bring about everlasting peace. This would put him in direct conflict with Emperor Ganishka, who wished to conquer all the lands and establish himself as the ruler of the entire world. Ganishka, who himself was an apostle and an extremely powerful one at that, did not recognize the authority of the God Hand. He believed that only he had the authority to rule over the world. After several indirect conflicts during which the Band of the Hawk thwarted his invasion of Midland, he would finally come face to face with the White Hawk in the Battle of Rattanis. The Emperor would be utterly trounced by the incarnated Griffith, and the gap in power between them would become only too apparent to Ganishka. Fueled by anger, fear, hatred, and jealousy, Ganishka's paranoia would consume him completely. Seeing no other way to defeat Griffith, having been driven mad by his loss to him, Ganishka would submerge himself within the amniotic fluids of the man-made Behelit, also known as the Demon's Womb. This contraption was created by his court sorcerer Daiba and was used to create his pseudo-apostle soldiers called Daka. Despite Daiba's best attempts to dissuade the monarch from taking such a drastic step, he's unable to do so. Ganishka emerges from this man-made behelit, having been infused with the evil of the astral plane as a gigantic monstrosity with little to nothing left of his own conscience. Now known as Ganishka, the twice reincarnated, he begins crushing both allies and enemies alike in his quest to best Griffith. As Griffith, in his released form as Femto, reaches out to touch Ganishka, their battle is interrupted by the arrival of the Skull Knight. The Knight, seeking to take advantage of the situation, tries to strike Griffith with his Sword of Actuation, which is a sword made out of a number of behelits thought to be capable of slaying the God Hand. However, Griffith manages to redirect the Skull Knight's blow towards Ganishka, which creates a huge tear in the fabric of reality. This leads to a cataclysmic release of the astral planes into the physical world, which feels like a gigantic surge or wave, thus being termed the Great Wave of the Astral World. Following this, Ganishka's giant form is transformed into the World Tree, and beneath its branches, as if out of thin air, materializes Griffith's capital city of Falconia. The Great Wave removes the various layers of the astral plane and their boundary with the physical world. Now, everything exists in the same plane at the same time, meaning things of myth and legend are now very much a reality, as monsters, beasts, and other creatures from tales now roam the real world. Thus, the Great Wave of the astral plane finally altered the world permanently and at a fundamental level. With the world now fraught with supernatural dangers, Falconia is the last bastion of humanity ruled by Griffith. With this, Griffith had fulfilled the prophecy of the Falcon, as he now led both the sinful Black Sheep, the Apostles, and the blind White Sheep, humans who didn't know his true form, and he had plunged the world into darkness by breaking down the barriers of the astral plane, releasing the horrors that lay within. This is perhaps the greatest cataclysmic event to have taken place in the world of Berserk, as the line between fact and fiction had permanently been erased. Marvelous verdict! Each of these events today has caused the world of Berserk to be altered forever, and in the process has cost the lives of a vast number of people. Not one of these events has been free of a tragedy and has come to pass at a great price. From the reincarnation of a person into demonhood by damning the person they love, to altering the very fabric of reality, the powers at work during these events are beyond astronomical. With the manga still going strong despite the tragic demise of its original author, Kentaro Miura, we are sure that there are many more cataclysmic events in store for us before the end. It is a testament to the genius of Miura-sensei how intricately interconnected all these events are, functioning as elaborate set pieces to let the audience grasp what's at stake while building his complex world and the story set within it. No one knows when the next temporal junction will appear, and the laws of causality will send humanity hurtling down another dark path. What we do know is that there will always be the likes of Guts, his friends, and the Skull Knight who will be there, ready to oppose their destiny, being the strugglers that they are. Time just flies by when we're talking about Berserk, so we'd love to stay and hear your take on these events, as the beauty of this series is that every reader can come away with their own interpretation of things. If you enjoyed this video, we've covered Berserk extensively on our channel. Lore analysis, theory crafting, character breakdowns, we've got it all, baby. We also have a plethora of anime content on our channel, so there's something for everyone. Thanks for sticking with us right to the end of this video. We hope to see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe and stay marvelous.